Welcome back to Cards and Comics, guys. I have another complete set from the 90s I'm going to show off. And this one's a pretty fun one, pretty cool one you don't see very often. It's from the 1999 EX Century product. And it was one every 2 boxes. I'm talking about Favorites for Fenway. And it is a pretty cool insert set. And again, let's do some math here. It was one every other box. So in 1999, a box of EX Century cost $108. It was, 18 packs for $6 a pack. So about $108 a box. So, it took $216 to get, to be guaranteed one of these inserts back in the day. So it's 20 inserts in the box. So, you're talking about over $4,000 of box breaks it would take to put a whole set together. Now, in today's money, a box of EX Century is about $300. So $600 for one card. And then you multiply that by 20, it's like $12,000 to open enough product to guarantee you one of these sets. So, it's kind of interesting to think about it in that way. Now, I know, you could just buy the cards and you will never pay $12,000 for the set. But it just gives you an idea of what it'd be like to try to get a set today out of packs. And even back then, it was expensive. So this is one of those insert sets from a product that was kind of expensive, even for $19.99. And it's one in every other box. So it's kind of a cool insert set. And I think it's also well designed. So let's go into it. Now, the premise of this set is that it was predicting who was going to be an all-star, and the all-star that year was in Boston, Fenway Park. That's why it's called Favorites for Fenway. And they were predicting who they thought could be in the all-star game that year. Now, as we go through each card in the set, I want you to kind of guess, do you think this player actually made the all-star game that year or not? So we'll go here, and we'll talk about the first player, but also go through the design. So the first player here is Mo Vaughn. And it's very interesting that Mo Vaughn is the first card in the set because he obviously was a Red Sox and he's no longer, he's an Angel. And let's talk about the card design. It's acetate, but it has this very intricate pattern. So you got sort of a border outline here, then sort of borders here. And then you've got kind of a shiny, sparkly frame here, and then the concentric circles, and then you've got the Fenway background, right? And so you can see through the card. Now, the cool thing about this card is they do the same exact design on the back. However, they do it in gold. You can see that gold background. And so the thing I would ask you is that, so you've got sort of a platinum blue on the front. And then you've got this metallic gold on the back. Do you think if the metallic gold was on the front of the card versus the back and the blue was on the back, this set would have been more popular or would have been more attractive? I think it's very interesting that they did 2 shades of foil, basically, and that they put the gold on the back and not the front. I'm wondering if it was on the front, whether or not this set would be more popular or more attractive, because we know how much people love gold cards, and just having that gold foil on the front, this could have been a more maybe popular set if that gold would have been on the front instead of the back. But I think it's a cool design, the double-sided foil. Now, Mo Vaughn, unfortunately, did not make the All-Star team in 1999. So if you guessed that he did, no, you're wrong. He did not make the team. In fact, Mo Vaughn went on a very big downward turn in his career, and I think he got hurt, and it was really didn't do much with the Angels. It was one of the worst free agent pickups in the history of baseball at that time. I think it's been surpassed by quite a bit in terms of dollars, but he never really paid off at all for the Angels. So it's just interesting that this is sort of that snapshot in time. So that's card number 1 in the set. And we'll move on to card number 2. Again, 20 card set. So card number 2 is Nar Garcia, who's an actual Red Sox. So it looks like they were trying to, cater to the Red Sox or former Red Sox. So Nar Garcia is number 2. Did he make the All-Star team that year? Well, yeah, he did, because I put a little dot for everyone who made the All-Star team. And so he was voted in as the starting shortstop over Derek Jeter and some other players. So that's interesting that he was, obviously being a Boston based All-Star game, they definitely want to have a player from their team as a starter, and Nomar made the starting lineup. So he is the starting All-Star. So they got this one right. There you go, the Nomar Garcia para. All right, card number 3. So this is a big one. One of the better players in this set. You got Frank Thomas. Again, love this Frank Thomas. And the only card I actually owned before I bought the entire set was I have a PSA 10 King Griffey Jr. And I own no other cards. And I opened one box of this on my channel and did not hit one of these inserts in that box. I did hit a Essential Credentials, but I did not hit a Favors for Fenway. So just shows you it's kind of interesting. I hit the Essential Credential, but not this insert. So there's the Frank Thomas. And again, a great, looking card. I love the back. And I love the fact that it's 2 different photos. It's just, this card is well designed. In fact, when you hold these cards, they're heavy. They have a weight to them. So it's just so cool that the designs that were in the 90s. And this is kind of a throwaway insert in EX Century. Right? EX Century is all about the credentials, right? That's what that set's really known for. But this insert set was really cool. It was pretty hard to get, and it's kind of forgotten about. And I do feel like it's one of those just, insert sets that screams 90s coolness. Acetate foil. If it was die cut, like instead of this outer edge, you kind of had the oval die cuts or something, that would have made it even cooler. But, I'm just saying they did a really good job on this set. Now, Frank Thomas, unfortunately, did not make the All-Star team that year. Doesn't have a little dot in the back. And it could be for a lot of reasons. I mean, look, you had a lot of competition at first base and DH back in 99. But he could have been hurt. And, you got to remember All-Star games, some players get voted in or turn it down because they're hurt or injured and they can't play. So, but, he did not make the All-Star team. So, again, that's 1 for 2 for EX predictions here. All right, next up is, this is a card that I own in a PSA 10, but it's a funny card. Again, it's the King Griffey Jr., so there you go. That's the most expensive card in the set. What I find amusing about this card is he's sitting in a chair. So I do give it creativity for, this set does have unique photos, but I think a lot of people, when they want really cool photos of Griffey, they don't see him sitting in a chair being that photo. But I think it's cool just because it's a photo you don't see very often. And again, here's the back with the cool gold. Again, I think that gold back just is cool. But I would have loved to seen this set with the gold on the front. Or wouldn't it have been cool if there was a parallel to this set where they inverted the foil, right? You had the traditional set was, blue on the front, gold on the back, and then they had a 1 in 72 pack version that was inverted. That would have been cool. There's the dot. So yes, King Griffey Jr. did make the starting outfield for the All-Star game in 1999. So they got this prediction right. So they were 2 for 4. So they're at batting 500 at this point in the set. Next up is Roger Clemens, who, at this point was probably a thorn in the side of the Boston fans because he was a former big-time Red Sox, and now he's with the hated Yankees. And there's the back, and no dot. So Mr. Clemens did not make the All-Star game that year. And again, he could have just been hurt or chose not to play or didn't make the team. But he would have been booed mercilessly at the time. You can see how that gold actually shines and kind of changes shimmer a little bit. I mean, it's just all the little details in cards like this make the 90s so cool. But no bueno for Mr. Clemens on the All-Star game. So 2 for 5 so far. Card number 6. Here we go. We've got the other big Mariner, A-Rod, another big time shortstop. Nice looking photo. in the back, and Mr. A-Rod did not make the All-Star game that year. So again, another shocking player not making the All-Star game. I think, again, injuries could have played a part. I don't know the stories of every player back in the day. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find out, like why certain players were not making the team that year. That looks like should have been, but hey, not making the team. So we're now 2 for 6. So not doing too well for predictions here. Next up is Mr. Derek Jeter. So this set is also kind of one of the reasons I got this set was because it has the Jeter, the Griffey, and the Thomas, 3 of the players I like to collect from the 90s. So there's your Derek Jeter. There is the gold. And yes, Mr. Jeter did make the All-Star game back in 1999. So 3 for 7 so far in their predictions. Such a cool card. And I'm wondering, I think these cards will grade high. The one thing you have to worry about these cards, and I can show you a little bit here, is sometimes the foil goes missing. You can see it right there along the edge. Sometimes the foil gets, will start to separate from the card. So, it depends on how they grade those kind of things. But I would assume they would hit the surface on a card like that. All right. Next up is a guy that's in every one of these sets because he was an MVP and was a good player for a long time. But Juan Gonzalez, not really got a strong market anymore, but he's in almost all these sets of the 90s. And he did not make the All-Star game that year. So 3 for 8 so far. Next up is making probably one of his last All-Star game appearances is Ripken Jr. Really cool looking card. I like the fact he's very dirty, just making some cool plays at third base. And yes, he was, I believe, the starting third baseman for this All-Star game. So there you go. 4 out of 9. It's almost hitting 500. So there you go. Pretty cool card. And unlike that Jeter, you don't see as much, I guess, foil loss, you would call it. So, all right. Next up, one of my kind of mini PC guys. I watched him play in Tulsa. I really like this guy. Ivan Rodriguez, and there you go. There's the cool foil. Nice looking photo. I wish they had him batting or throwing. Just standing there is kind of a very static, but okay, you get what you get. And he was, I believe, the starting catcher for that year. So there you go. 5 of 10. So they're back to 500. So, we've got, Ivan Rodriguez, Cal Ripken, Derek Jeter, King Griffey Jr., and Nomar as being All-Star game. All-Star game players in 1999 that was predicted. Next up is probably one of the worst cards in the set from a prediction, and just, this guy was given way, way, way too much. I don't know, credibility, but emphasis in sets back in the day. He was as hyped as any rookie that really has come along in a long time. JD Drew, and obviously the Philadelphia, hating him because he turned him down and all that stuff. Now, did he make the All-Star game? No, not a chance in heck that he would make the All-Star game in 99. It was just a way to get him in the set because they wanted to have, a hot rookie or young player in the set. Next up is Barry Bonds. So, you would think this is a no-brainer. This guy had to make the All-Star game that year. Cool looking hitting card. And no, he did not make the All-Star game that year. And I would probably suggest that most likely it was injuries, or he wanted to rest. The All-Star game kind of really took a downturn around this time period in my eyes because a lot of players were, not wanting to play. It didn't mean anything. I mean, it was just kind of like a game that took out of some of their vacation time. So players who have played in a few of them kind of didn't want to play in every one of them. So that could have been the case here. But Mr. Bonds was not an all-star that year, or didn't make the game. Next up is Mr. Tony Gwynn, in one of those kind of interesting Pottery uniforms. It feels like the Padres have changed their uniform so many times. So here's your blue Pottery uniform. And yes, Tony Gwynn did make the team that year, and I believe he was a starter. So, which is kind of cool because it's 16 years after he debuted, 17 years for Cal Ripken. So these are kind of the last hurrah for a lot of players like Tony Gwynn and Cal Ripken at this time in the set. But he did make the All-Star game that year. So Tony Gwynn was a yes. All right. Vlad Guerrero. So this is a tough one. What do you guys think about this one? Do you think Vlad made the All-Star game this year? I mean, the outfield was pretty tough. A lot of competition. I love that photo of him swinging where his knees almost touching the ground because Vlad covered a lot of play. So did he make the All-Star game that year? Yes, he did. Vlad was a but he was a reserve outfielder that year. So pretty cool. And it's a nice looking card. Good. I love that photo. Just like that really encompasses a lot of what he was doing. All right. Next up. Ooh, this is a good one. Chipper Jones. Chipper Jones. He was kind of in his heyday here as a third baseman. Nice photo. Cool looking card again. Did he make the All-Star game? No, he did not. No All-Star game for Chipper. So, interesting there that he did not make the All-Star game. All right. Next up is Carrie Wood. Carrie Wood was just a few years into the league at this point. I think he'd already had his big 20-game strikeout at this point. But he did not make the All-Star team. And you got to remember, Carrie Wood was fragile. And so this could have been to save his arm, or he may have already started to get hurt at this point. But in 99, they did not have him pitch. I would think he would have made it, but did not. All right, next up, we got Mike Piazza. Mike Piazza. This is, again, Mike Piazza was also in his heyday. There you go, New York Mets. So he'd already gone from the Dodgers to the Mets at this point, and he was the starter that year. So you got Mr. Mike Piazza, starting catcher for the All-Star game. All right, just a few more to go. Next up is Sammy Sosa. Interesting photo. And again, it's kind of cool. This is such a snapshot in time because of Sosa, Bonds, they're like the big steroid guys, they were the studs. And Sosa was on the All-Star game that year, and I believe he was a starter. And this is obviously the time period where, the big mashing and the home run record breaking was happening. So it makes total sense that he was the All-Star that year. Here is Scott Rolland. So this is a classic Scott Rolland photo. This has probably been on 50 cards for Scott Rolland that kind of pose at third base. Such a good defensive player, so it makes sense. And he did not make the All-Star team that year. Pretty new player. I mean, he was it doesn't surprise me, but he could have for sure. He was such a good player, but he did not make it that year. And then last but not least is the guy that, right now at this point in 1999 was probably the biggest player in the game. It's Mark Maguire. And I find that such an interesting photo, basically being mobbed after a home run. Because on inserts, like on top space cards and stadium club cards, this would have been a perfect photo. On these high-end inserts, which I think this is a pretty rare insert, you don't usually see like traditional pose photos on these kind of inserts. So I think that's interesting. They chose to do this photo on the Maguire, which is kind of cool. Then on the back, you definitely get the portrait. And Maguire was definitely the starter at first base that year for the All-Star game. So if you count them all up, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So they hit about a 50% prediction rate of who was on the All-Star game that year. So not too bad. I mean, I think, the other picks they made that wouldn't make that game that year, like, Frank Thomas and Clemens and A-Rod, Barry Bonds. Those were pretty, obvious type picks at, Chipper Jones. But Scott Rolland, maybe Carrie Wood, but definitely J.D. Drew were kind of like, you're just kind of reaching there for those. So that's the full set, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's a really interesting set. And I really think that it's kind of underplayed in terms of just how attractive it is. And it's fairly inexpensive. You can get a lot of the cards really cheap. So, if you're really interested in a card from a really expensive product that sells really cheap and is actually really nice, cards, I would definitely go for it. You can get a lot of these cards, again, super duper cheap. And even the Frank Thomas and the Barry Bonds and players like that, they don't really sell for much. It's not hugely popular, but I just think it's because people just, only care about the credentials from that set, and they don't look at these other inserts. So, but there it is, guys. 1999 favorites for Fenway, EX Century insert set, complete set. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you next time in Cards and Comics. Bye.